Good morning, everyone, or good evening here. It's about 10 p.m. in Taipei. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. Okay, to everyone, thank you for your time today. I know it's early in the morning for you guys. I'm here together with Stephen, our CEO. And today we're going to introduce you to the concept of Industry 5.0. So before you go ahead and say I'm nuts, I'm just going to say that by the end of this presentation, I'm 100% sure that everyone's going to be agreeing with what we're seeing here on the ground. Okay. So on the agenda today, I'm just going to make a quick introduction of who we are and where we come from. The story is pretty interesting, I guarantee it. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the user experience, because what we do has a heavy focus on user experience first. We also use computer graphics, and all these things come together with the user behavior. Then we're going to jump into trends, because in this IoT world, this industry, you see a new term coming along every day, basically. And how do you actually turn those trends into intrinsic value that is going to be a good value proposition for your end users or your customers or whoever you're working with? And in the end, we're going to conclude what is the shape of this Industry 5.0 and how it absolutely changes everything. Okay, let's go. So about us, I'm going to start with myself, selfishly, and Stephen. So basically, I'm a French guy, studied computer graphics in France, and then I moved to Canada, where I joined a startup who was doing some 3D surveillance system even before the IoT was a thing. So of course, I had no idea that I would end up one day in this IoT industry. So I worked there, and we were creating 3D physical security solutions. So just imagine your Google Earth, and you can see security cameras positioned at the right locations in the 3D world. And when you clicked on them, you would see the video feed and so on and so forth. So we did a lot of projects for law enforcement, especially in the US. We even did the DFW airport. I've been there a couple times. And eventually I moved to Singapore, where we won a huge military project. So we applied the same concept of 3D for physical security. And Stephen at the time was from Siemens, and we were working on a similar project where he came with insights from the building automation. And I had all the insights from the computer graphics, the games, the video games, and the cool user experience. So after my Canadian company got bought over by Singapore Telecom, I went back to France for a year, and then Stephen told me, hey, you know what? Why don't we really push it to the next level? Let's experiment with this technology. And that's the reason I'm here in Taiwan today. So Kurt is our representative for North America. So if you have any questions regarding investor relations or what's the direction we're going to take for the US market, you can go ahead and approach him, or Gary, who's the VP of Business Development for the US market. All right, so in a nutshell, who are we and what do we do? So we create the most advanced IoT management platform. You guys have never seen something like this before. So we're based in Taipei, and the particular thing about us is that we use digital twins. I'm sure everyone's kind of familiar with it, but we'll cover that later. We combine those digital twins with live IoT sensor data. And our goal is to offer a situational awareness of facilities for managers and operation managers, facility managers, anywhere in the world for their facilities. So we have an international team of about 50 people, and our key areas of expertise are the IoT, of course, but we invest heavily in user experience, computer graphics, 3D, data analytics, and visualization. So when all of this comes together, and you'll see that in a minute, you really get something that is completely different from what the other players on the market are doing. So we were founded in 2017, and we spent the first 2 years validating the value of our idea by co-creating features with our customers. So basically, we want to see the guys that work in the automation industry or airports, all of our previous customers. And we told them, hey, you know what, guys, we believe that 3D can really help you to better understand the key operational problems you are facing. So we went ahead and did that, and we developed the features alongside with the customers to really create software that has a right place on the market. So last year, we had a project for Foxconn in Wisconsin. So the really cool part about being in the Asia Pacific region, or Taiwan, is that enterprises here are really interested to try new things. So if you go ahead and tell them, we have reasons to believe that this is going to benefit your organization, you already ending up with a proof of concept, and that proof of concept turns into a full-fledged project. So that's what happened with the Foxconn Wisconsin factory. They had over 250,000 IoT endpoints, and the factory is really massive. I mean, you can see that thing from space. So we used our digital twins and our design philosophy approach to deliver that project to them. And we're going to showcase this a little bit later. Just before Christmas, or just in time for the end of the year, we won the Microsoft Innovation Award. So Microsoft basically selected a couple startups here in Taiwan to see what was kind of like happening on the IoT scene, and was anyone compatible with their cloud solutions, and could we collaborate together to offer a package service for their factory or data center kind of clients. So we got it, and we got a presidential endorsement. So I'm not sure if you can see clearly in the picture, but that's Taiwan's president alongside with Microsoft executives. Doing the kickoff for the Reimagine Taiwan initiative. So we're very lucky to be part of this. And in our client portfolio, we have some major airports, global data centers in North America, APAC, and Foxconn and TSMC. So basically the world's largest electronics and semiconductor manufacturers. So let's move on. So there's this concept of the IoTification. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because essentially everything is becoming an IoT device. So I told you earlier that I was doing computer graphics for the physical security industry. And at the time, there was a real clear distinction between physical security, you were talking about door access control or security cameras, and like building management, SCADA kind of systems, ERPs. And over time, we're noticing that everything is becoming an IoT device. So McKinsey is predicting by 2027, over 40 billion IoT devices are going to be in service worldwide. But that is most likely an understatement, because when you look at this pandemic, for example, it's crazy to imagine the number of new IoT devices that were deployed just for COVID. So the pace is accelerating at an exponential rate. And we believe that we're going to hit the trillion IoT device mark by the end of the decade, basically. And I'll just come back to this idea that everything is an IoT sensor these days. So vehicles are becoming IoT sensors. Your Uber driver technically is an IoT endpoint. You can see it on the GPS of your app. We're seeing refrigerators or toasters, vacuum cleaners are becoming IoT devices as well. So the line between the nature of the IoT device and the sensor is really getting thinner. So essentially, any IoT device is just a sensor. Maybe it's a sensor that can see, like a CCTV, a sensor that can open doors, or so on and so forth. So you really need to keep that idea in mind. So the real question here, when we started this endeavor, was, okay, IoT devices are being deployed at an exponential rate, but how are businesses going to manage them? So you hear a lot about smart cities, but you need to put yourself in their shoes. Like you're the decision maker, you're the mayor, or you're the governor, and you decided, okay, I want to make my city basically a smart city. So you're going to start buying sensors from different brands because you have different needs. I want my security cameras to have that feature. I want my door access control to have this. I want my warehouses to have this other system. So this created what we call silo operations. So you have control rooms where you have one team of engineers on shifts, and one team is handling the video surveillance of operations. Another one is handling the fire emergency situations. Another one is going to handle the energy, the cooling, and so on and so forth. So as you scale those, your IoT device portfolio, essentially it comes at a hidden cost because you need to pay to run those devices and to actually make sense of all that data. And we saw an opportunity in that because we're like, okay, all these different systems are actually not talking to each other, even despite being on the Internet of Things. So we created a platform with the basis of 3D maps. Why 3D? Because the real world is in Euclidean space, and it's basically in 3D. So I'm also a millennial, so I grew up with video games, and I'm very familiar with 3D. It speaks to me. And one of the key factors that made us choose 3D over 2D, because 2D is so much simpler, is we had a client. It was a data center client back in 2016. He approached me and he was like, Louis, I'm talking with the BMS manufacturers. Of course, I need their software to do my SCADA in my data centers, but I need another layer, another product layer that's his own words. He said, but it needs to look like what Tony Stark has in Iron Man. So he said, well, everyone he's talked to told him, well, it can be done. It's science fiction. So we decided to take the challenge and to rise to the occasion. So yeah, that's why we chose 3D, because 3D speaks to our intuition. And as you're going to see in the next slide, we have a very particular design philosophy. So basically, what you see on the top here is your typical command and control room for the average customer. So they have multiple workstations that have different purposes, and they're not talking to each other. We noticed that, for example, in all those security cameras that you're seeing in cities, they are actually never used to solve a problem in real time. They're only used for investigation. So we thought, okay, so the return on invested capital for the owners of these CCTVs is actually pretty low. So how can we solve, how can we improve that? Then there's the access control guys. They're not talking to the CCTV guys. So you have a shooting, everyone is operating on a side, and after the incident, there's kind of like a retrospective. So we really thought, okay, we think that there's a better way to do this. So we turned that into what you're seeing at the bottom. So we create like a dashboard that is a little bit reminiscent of what you see in those Iron Man movies. So you have the 3D computer graphics, you have dashboards where you can see your security cameras, all the data feeds are coming. So for us, we completely abstract what is a device, because all devices for us is just a sensor, regardless of what it gives us, regardless of the brand. So we can include that in one common operating picture to give people a situational awareness. So instead of doing your investigations, you know where the suspect is on the camera. You can track him in the 3D world because you are actually in the 3D world. So you can follow him and you can recognize where he is on the CCTV looking at the looks of the 3D map. You can issue a lockdown because you know the position of all the door access control sensors. So you can lock the perimeter if you want. So abstracting the IoT really gives you more power and more control, because you're operating above the system that is below. So in a nutshell, that is what we do. So I mentioned a lot about digital twins, but what does it really mean? What you're looking at right now is a lower Manhattan. So of course, perhaps you saw this kind of demo for Apple Maps or Google Maps, Bing Maps, or whatnot. But we are taking this concept and saying, okay, create a digital replica of buildings and everything that's inside the building, and display it in real time at 60 frames per second and super realistic graphics, as well as augmented graphics, to make it really easy for the users to understand what they're looking at. So basically, that's just what a digital twin is just a digital replica of a real asset that is placed in a virtual world for convenience. And you'll see how this, as the foundation of our platform, can really transform the way you're interacting with the IoT, or even the conception you have of the IoT. All right, so like I previously mentioned, we come from the gaming sector and the building automation sector. Video games have something that is extremely powerful. Video games are intuitive. If you have children, they're playing video games. They grew up with video games. They didn't go to school to learn how to play the video game. They just intuitively knew how to operate it. So we took the exact same approach, and then we added another layer that we call design by subtraction. If I show you the typical PLC dashboard, the dashboard looks extremely complex. You have a lot of machines, and you have a lot of data points. You have a lot of numbers, and it feels like almost like you need a PhD just to understand what's going on. And there's no context. I mean, everything is nicely presented, but you don't know in the context of the real world, where is this machine icon in my giant factory with 250,000 IoT points. So what we do is, when we create the digital twin, we don't need to put icons for the devices anymore, because it's really a representation, like you can see on the first picture, of what it looks like in the real world. So each of these machines have a tag name. You can search it, press enter, and the system will just take you there and show you the live KPI of that specific machine, or the floor KPI, or the building KPI, or whichever granular level you're interested in. Next, I want to talk about, well, I'll just add one more thing about the design by subtraction. By removing all the complex things that you see on the screen and only showing the user with the most relevant information, it's really like in a video game. You have an objective and you need to fulfill the mission or the objective or the checkpoint. And we call this process the gamification, because millennials especially are not appealed by software that looks like Microsoft Excel. So of course, Microsoft Excel is a great software. I don't mean to criticize it. However, the expectation has become liquid, and that is the next topic. By liquid expectation, it's a term I learned back in my consulting days for Fortune 500 companies. We use that a lot. Is a new trend where people are using their personal experience, like, for example, perhaps as an individual, I'm using Uber every day, or Uber Eats. I'm using some apps that are on the Google Store or Apple Store, and everything is so convenient for me. Everything is so easy. And without knowing it, I'm going to start bringing this expectation at work too. So if something wasn't smooth in my user experience at work, I'm going to feel like, oh, but why is it like that? Because I had the same experience with Uber, but it was so much smoother. So in the context of the IoT, it's really simple. Like, people are playing video games all the time on their phone and they look cool, and suddenly they're going to their command and control center and they're seeing some really complex PLC software with some complex design language there. So by using the design by subtraction, we remove anything that is unnecessary, anything that you don't need to know. You only need to know what is important. So that is the first layer of our design philosophy. The second layer, we call it the common operating picture. So, okay, I have a customer, he's a data center guy. They want to connect to all of their, they have a Schneider. They want to collect all the SCADA points in the Schneider. They want to put all the CCTV, all the access control, and so on and so forth. So by doing that, and by giving them the software in the control room, as well as the mobile applications, everyone's on the same page. You no longer need a PhD to understand what's going on, because we use a very video gamey like design language. Everybody knows that red is not good, blue is okay, and orange might be not good but not bad. So we are really triggering this kind of intuitive or natural response from people. And we're doing some tests, like I'll just give you some funny examples. We are doing software for factories or mission critical facilities. And we're seeing kids, because my boss or Steven, the CEO, has some kids. So sometimes they show up at the office to say hi, and they're looking at what's going on the screen, and they are surprisingly able to say, oh, is this the alarm, or is this the problem? And those are like 4 or 5-year-old kids. So we don't want to brag, but in the right hands or with the proper training, a 7-year-old can theoretically run your data center. And that is a very powerful fact. So we are really pushing in this area, because the important thing that you're going to start to notice is the kind of people who are going to work in command and control centers is going to evolve, and we can already see it. It's going to be young people. They didn't necessarily go to college, but they are digital natives. They understand things, digital things, in a very natural way. So those kind of people are going to be working in your command and control room, while the engineers that studied a lot are going to move to strategy. They're going to use the insights gathered by the command and control room to make decisions on how to improve things. The last thing I want to talk about on this slide is what we call the situational awareness. So I mentioned that a couple times before. So everyone's on the same page. It doesn't matter if you're in Tokyo, Newark, or if you're in Vancouver. If you have the app and you're part of the enterprise network, you are going to be able to know what is the alarm, what is the status. And we developed this because the people in the data center world in Singapore basically told us, oh, if we have an outage here for more than 1 hour, we can theoretically go out of business, and it's going to cost us millions of dollars. So they wanted something to be able, they wanted a tool to enable the non-technical people, like the business people, the managers. They didn't go to engineering school, and when there's a crisis, they need to ask the engineers, who are really smart people, but they're not good at communication. So it causes a lot of stress not knowing what is the severity of the situation, or is this something that we're going to be able to solve in a few minutes type thing. So that is what we call the situational awareness, and it's really important. Okay, let's move forward.
We did have a question online on the chat.
Oh, sure.
And I think it would be a good time to address it. It's from Tom. He says, many municipal governments were sold the benefits of IoT. However, once IoT sensors were installed, the government realized they did not have the staff to continuously support IoT, nor did they have the field of support. How does your solution resolve this?
Okay, well, that's really spot on. So we were having this exact conversation yesterday. It's not just governments. It's also private enterprises that during the design stage where they're like, okay, we're going to create this green building, and once the construction is over, the building starts using a lot more power than anticipated. So they didn't scope what's going to be the cost of running the operations for the next 20 to 30 years for that building. And the same concept can be applied for government entities. So you make some investments, you deploy the IoT devices, and then you realize, oh my God, I need to put so many people on payroll just to make this work or relevant or make sense of the data. So that is why I was telling you that the kind of people that are going to be working in your command and control center are probably going to be students, people that are looking for a student job. They are completely fluent in apps, and they use computers all the time. And with minimal training, they're going to be able to run this. And that is the first trend you're going to see appearing. And we are sure that this is going to be the case, because there's a lot at stake in the IoT years. But I'm going to keep that part for a few more slides down the road. So may I continue?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask the question while it seemed relevant.
Thank you. All right, and so we continue. Okay, so now I'm gonna talk to you guys about the trends and how do you convert them into intrinsic value for customers. So I told you we had this case for Foxconn in Wisconsin, and there was a lot at stake because it's bringing factories, jobs to the province, and it's creating jobs, and manufacturing in that area was something that they wanted to do. So Foxconn decided that, okay, we want to do things in a better way, so we're going to use this as the ground zero for your platform, and let's see how it behaves. So as you can see in the video, there are a lot of components in that factory. The scale is really mind-boggling. So you have HVAC systems, you have power systems, you have piping systems, water systems. I mean, the list never ends. So, of course, it was a very challenging idea to take that project because of the sheer scale of things. But at the same time, it would provide us with a lot of data on what is the real value that we can deliver to a customer and what they do with that value, because we want them to be more successful. Okay, so
that relates to a question that we have online from Yvonne. What about people who have visual disabilities like colorblindness? Does your software visual platform offer some kind of adaptive technology for people with these types of disabilities? And that was the question online. But furthermore, you're looking at a pretty dense visual display there. So how do you adapt for that? Because that's a lot to visually input when you have that much visual representation.
Okay, well, I'm going to answer in a perfectly honest way. So at this stage of the development, we didn't have the time and resources necessary to adapt this solution to visually impaired people for the moment. But eventually, when we get more resources, investments, and as we scale, these are going to be some areas we're going to be focusing on. But at the moment, we really haven't invested into allowing visually impaired people to have access to this solution, because we come from computer graphics industries, and we wanted to hit that first milestone first.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions online. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So coming back to this Foxconn, like you mentioned, it's extremely dense. So the IoT density in that facility is absolutely insane. And everything is connected. Everything, like if a component breaks, it might affect another operation that is in another sector of the factory. So we all know that Industry 4.0, I mean, the cornerstone of that was kind of like predictive maintenance. I think that was a heavily branded point of Industry 4.0. So of course, Foxconn wanted that. So we say, of course, we're going to be able to deliver that. But first, let's look at the key operational problems that we validated that we could solve using this case. So we removed the silos. Over here, there's a lot of different systems integrated, and although at a bottom layer, you have the SCADA systems, the CCTV systems, fire systems, we were able to really sit on the top. And this is the previous abstraction I told you about. It allows everyone to be on the same page. You unify the data. You are able to correlate sensor data from different brands together and create some rules. Like, for example, you have a lot of false alarms with CCTVs, for example. When there's a bird that goes in front of the camera, boom, you got like a motion detection event. And these things happen a lot. And operators, the last thing you want is them getting used to events that are not critical. You want the system to push only the critical stuff that you want them to focus on. And we do this with a rules engine and correlation. So instead of having like every time you have a motion detected, you send me an event, you can say, okay, don't send me any events unless it's after office hours, after 6 p.m. I create a rule, okay, the CCTV will no longer send notifications before 6 p.m. and after 6 p.m. you can send me an event, and you can send me you can escalate it to an alarm if you have an access control incident within that vicinity. So that is the true power of abstraction. You completely obliterate the paradigm of silos. Oh yeah, but I need a team to run my access control, and I need another team. No, you don't. Now you need the engineers to maintain those systems, but the guys running the operations are not going to be looking down at that. They're not going to be using the management platform provided by the access control provider or supplier. It's the same paradigm that is being applied in computer science. So today's developers for the web, Java or C++, they're not going to be diving to the assembly level because it has been completely abstracted. So we apply the same philosophy to the IoT. And once you apply this, it allows your data to be unified, like you mentioned. But the real value here is you're able to detect patterns from correlated data. So any sensors, any type of sensors can create, just a moment. Any type of sensors data is being correlated, and we visualize in a way that you can say, oh, why is it that every Thursday there's a power spike here, and on Friday morning we have a problem with the HVAC in sector 4? These are the kind of things that are possible because you're using 3 digital twins and you're correlating this data from different sensor brands. Now I'm going to come back to the machine learning paradigm that is also a buzzword in this IoT, within this IoT community. So, of course, customers will ask us, oh yeah, but I want an AI component, like systematically. It's something that is by default now. I want to have some machine learning. But we are the tech guys. We're sitting in the industry. We're sitting first seat in the industry, so we really know what's going on. And especially as a startup company, our role is to deliver key value to our clients, and it's the same for you. Just a moment. I think there's a problem with the webcam. Okay. So yeah, our role is to provide. It's not just us. It's for everyone within this community. We all want to deliver value to our customers. We want them to be successful in the IoT endeavor. And we have a criticism towards the traditional AI approach that is being thrown out there everywhere. So everyone is going to tell you, okay, yeah, you get to take my AI module, it's going to do some machine learning and so on and so forth. However, we always thought that there was something not so great about this. You need to visualize things. You are telling the machine to learn patterns from the past. So the machine is going to do that. And it's going to work perfectly in predicting what's going to happen. It's going to give you some great averages until it doesn't work anymore. So we have an analogy for this. You need to imagine that you're driving a car and you're trying to steer the car by looking at the back mirror. And it's possible until normality ends. So this approach to AI could have never predicted that we were going to be in this world, in this pandemic world, because the past data would have never suggested that something like this would happen. And we're always on a new road. We're always on a new road. And if you correlate, we found that if you correlate this machine learning averages with insights from the people on the ground, you can get a much more precise prediction. So instead of having a porcupine, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with a porcupine graph or a chart, is like all your experts are telling you what the prediction is going to be, and then the actual obliterates all the prediction. And this is infamous, especially in the oil and gas industry. Like everyone's trying to predict what the oil prices are going to be, but no one's really looking at some factors like humans like to create more efficient things. So they are, the AI would not be able to tell you that humans were going to be able to invent fracking, or that there was going to be some wars that are going to affect the prices, and so on and so forth. And by correlating the human insights with what the machine is learning from your day-to-day operations, you get to the point where you are able to at least have the choice. Like, okay, my experts on the ground are telling me that in 3 months, we are not going to be able to continue operations normally because some of the machines are going to be needing maintenance and so on and so forth. So we call this like it's a paradigm of like you can now forecast the market or market to forecast. So these are some key points, key values that we're able to offer to our customers and our partners as well, who want to deploy these kind of solutions for their customers. Moving on. This will be the last part of my presentation. So basically, I told you guys about Industry 5.0, and you may be thinking, but in Industry 4.0 just got branded. How can you have the guts to say something like this? Well, I'm telling you with absolute pride and confidence that it's already a thing. Industry 5.0 is here. I told you earlier, you have the IoT, you have the IIoT, medical IoT, you have the physical security IoT, law enforcement IoT, home consumers IoT. It doesn't matter now the nature of the IoT device. It seems, and that is the metaphysical aspect of this presentation, it seems like humans have something in their DNA where we are somehow deploying more and more IoT devices into the world. We don't really know what we are building, but it's starting to have a shape. It's starting to have a shape. It seems like a super kind of human that can process so much information. That can process so much information and gather insights from this information. And we are seeing the first IoT wars. Essentially, all those disputes that we're seeing along 5G, for example, is governments reacting to the fact that whoever controls the IoT controls everything. because you have medical IoT. You need to protect all your IoT devices from intruders. Threats are not physical anymore. Warfare is not so physical anymore, because if an adversary to infiltrate your domestic IoT infrastructure or market, they can essentially create a lot more damage than by using brute force. So these are things that we're seeing now, and everyone in this super connected world is now a contributor. You see people with an IoT watch, smartwatch. People have iPads. We're going to hit 100 trillion IoT devices in service somewhere in the world. Never stopping to broadcast new information in the cloud. How do you make sense of all this? You have the cybersecurity, physical security, SCADA systems, vehicles, toasters, everything merged into just the IoT. You're going to be able to combine your AI insights from machine learning with what your industry experts are saying is going to happen, or anything that is identified as a threat. And everything combined together like this, everyone contributing to this, whether they like it or not, it's just happening. Like, you move somewhere, you're a contributor. This is what we call Industry 5.0. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed.
All right, Chris, would you like to read Yvonne Salazar's chat that she wrote? Question?
If you could go ahead and ask that question, would be great. I'm having to
Sure.
Handle a few other things on the back end right now.
Okay, so Yvonne Salazar asked, how is NADI dealing with cybersecurity threats for their systems?
Okay, pleasure for me to answer this question. So at the moment, we're handling the cybersecurity part by following the guidelines of our customer organizations network people. So typically, when you work with a large organization, they're going to have some policies, and they have their own people or their preferred cybersecurity solution already deployed there, and we just need to be compliant to their requirements. However, I'd like just to emphasize on the point that you notice that physical security software is starting to look a lot more like what we're doing these days. It's no longer Norton antivirus to protect some computers. Now it's some software that looks like the IoT, but they visualize the digital flow of information and threats through their systems. So that also comes back to everything is coming together in this Industry 5.0.
Okay, Vaughn, does that answer your question? I see you're unmuted.
Yes, it does. Yeah, that's interesting. But do you need to like automate something to kind of work with their? I mean, they have their own cybersecurity systems, and yeah, that's another thing. Everybody kind of has their own brand. But do you ever have to do anything like to connect or interface with their cybersecurity, or you just let whichever corporation handle it? Because I could see it in either scenario.
So far, most of our customers are technically off the grid, so they do not have an internet connection that is officially linking their private networks with the whole world. So they're taking this approach because everyone is a little bit cautious about what could be the impact of a potential leak. So in the future, of course, we would like to collaborate or potentially acquire some players in the cybersecurity space, because providing the total solution is really the key of dominating the market of tomorrow.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you.
Anyone else have a
Welcome.
question?
Solomon says it was an impressive demonstration and thank you. But he has a question, and he goes, this appears to be an IoT application integrating the feeds from multiple sensors versus an IoT management system. So as an in regards to your software, it looks like just trying to understand the aggregation parts of your software versus the management pieces of the software.
Sure. So basically what you saw was our front-end application. So the first layer, of course, is aggregating everything. But we have a server configuration tool where we allow users to create their own rules, their own SOPs, what is triggered when a specific alarm or event is triggered, and so on and so forth. So it also supports multi-users, and there's an audit trail for everything. So, for example, I can see an icon of my manager moving around in 3D and doing some actions, assigning tasks to specific team members until they close the alarm. We also have an escalation function for the alarm. So if, let's say, the level 3 alarm is triggered, and nobody responds to it within a certain configurable amount of time, we're able to escalate it to the higher authority. And of course, everything is completely federated. So you can even use your Microsoft Active Directory to handle your user accounts.
So if you could elaborate on that just a little bit, do you have the traditional IoT platform that's underneath your application, or is that something that you've actually written yourself that's just part of the overall system? Maybe just kind of rephrase it just a little bit. So you've got all the traditional business rules engines, methodologies for ingesting devices, the traditional IoT Central Azure platform capabilities, I guess would be the best way to put it. That is part of your system.
Yes, but we also want to make it clear that we rewrote everything by ourselves, because we need to have our applications run at a very reactive frame rate. We cannot depend on some third-party libraries. So we do everything ourselves. And this is, well, basically we're IoT agnostic, like I mentioned before. So you can really configure any kind of rules that would be meaningful for your specific environment. And perhaps I forgot to mention this before, but if you have if you have enough data that is relevant, for example, fan speed, temperatures, you can also do some heat maps or computer fluid dynamics. If you have a powerful server, you can do that too, or you can run it in the cloud. And all the vectors are going to be displayed in your user interface, which also enhances human intuition.
So we've got a couple of questions on chat I want to make sure we get to. One's kind of directly related to what you're saying. And it's a follow-up question from Solomon, and then we'll get to Maria's question. But Solomon asked, because he asked, how is a new sensor added to this network? Because as you mentioned, you're kind of sensor system agnostic. So how do you onboard a new sensor type? And how do you, add it to your platform? Because the ecosystems are all so different.
Okay, so luckily for us, in the era of the IoT, most of the protocols have been standardized. So almost everything is IP-based except the SCADA stuff. And if you're talking about this data, it's probably a Modbus or an OPC. And we have gateways to handle all of this. And these are updated constantly. This is also part of the reason why we're in Taiwan, because this is where manufacturing happens. And we're able to see 2 years before a product is released, if there's going to be a new interface. So far, we didn't come across major enterprises that had something that wasn't adequate for to connect to our platform.
Okay, and then we had another question.
The second part,
go ahead.
oh, sure, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
So the second part is perhaps the question that was originally intended is, how do you add a new IoT sensor on the list or inside the digital twin? So we have an editor tool to handle that. And with a little bit of training, your system administrator can take care of this kind of updates, and then it's going to be pushed to everyone in your organization.
Okay. And let's go ahead and get Maria's question here. She says, I understand the need to eliminate business silos. However, without showing some solid path to ROI, business units are extremely hesitant to go to something new. Goes to risk evaluation and CapEx on the front end.
Okay. So this is something we used to get during our early adopters time, but with all the cases that we've delivered so far for major customers, we can now go and have the confidence to look the customer in the eye and tell them, listen, biggest semiconductor company is using this, biggest electronics manufacturer, global data centers, airports are using this, and we have key metrics for all of these verticals, so to speak, to say, okay, this, we can guarantee that within 12 months, you guys will have the operational insights to take management decisions on what to improve in your facility to cut down costs for energy, cooling, or inefficiencies in, like, perhaps you have too many security cameras deployed, or it could be anything. And that is the beauty of abstraction, is that we're not looking to solve only one specific, but we're looking to solve abstract problems that potentially don't even exist today.
Maria, do you want to unmute, and if you have any follow-up questions to that?
All right, I think that's good. It's very difficult when governments, entities like what I work for, they tend to set budgets. They tend to not be so futuristic and looking at technology, what technology is doing. So to go back and tell somebody, well, the system that you put in a year ago needs to be updated or moved, or we're going to go to something new, it's almost impossible to get that movement before the next, as you guys want to put it, Industrial 4.0, 5.0 comes along. So it is a struggle, and you're right, depending on experience and deployments, that's probably what we need to look at to gauge, hey, this could be a strong ROI for us.
Yeah, but it also, I just want to add on from my experience working for the military. Different government agencies will have different goals. So right now, we're talking with a group associated with the UCLA because they want to be able to use this platform to monitor the progress made towards carbon neutrality. And the kind of dashboards that we provide are already visually convincing because when you see it running, I mean, you've seen portions of it on the slides, but when you see it in a control room, it absolutely blows your mind harder than Iron Man movie. So that's a reaction we get from government people as well. And luckily for us, we're based in the APAC region, where governments like Singapore or Taiwan are not risk adverse to try it first. So we can have the reference site there, and if we want to invite people to come over and take a look for themselves, we're more happy to do so.
Any follow up, Maria? Maria?
I think I'm good on this one.
All right. Any other questions at this point?
Gary, Joe Magano has raised his hand. Joe,
Hey,
would you
guys.
like to unmute
Can you
yourself?
hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Joe. Go
We can
ahead.
hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can
Yes.
hear you
Yep.
now.
Okay, thanks. Hey, very interesting presentation, by the way, so thank you. So I come from some security background work, and if you think of what you guys are doing, siloed data has a value, right? But when you bring it and you consolidate and you unsilo it and you connect X to Y and Z means this, all of a sudden the value of that data goes up exponentially. So the security aspects of the data, in my mind, become really concerning, because now it's just not, okay, so you have an HVAC alarm somewhere else, that's one thing. But when you start looking at, all the parameters of security in a facility, like I said, the consolidation of data becomes very important and becomes very valuable. So which kind of brings up the questions of, in a traditional cybersecurity environment, how do you protect the data? Where do you process the data? Where do you store the data? How long is it stored? And let me put those questions in context. A lot of companies have really crappy cybersecurity systems. Okay, they may have some great IT people, but from my experience, not very good cybersecurity people. You're creating a data lake of incredibly valuable information. How do you protect it?
Okay, so to answer this very shortly, this is actually the main challenge of the Industry 5.0. Basically, what is happening is suddenly people are realizing the value of the data, and every time we deploy a new IoT sensor, you're actually deploying a new vulnerability somewhere in the world that can be exploited by hackers or interest groups of any sorts. So this is becoming, policymakers are entering the game as well, because we're seeing some incredible things happen on the hacking scene as well. Traditional PLC software, so programmable logic controllers for energy is extremely sensitive, nuclear power plants and so on and so forth. If you look at the heist that happened in Iran, for example, where they were able to, a specific group was able to introduce a computer virus, a worm, that basically instructed the machines on the ground through the means of the PLC software, sending genuine instructions to destroy themselves slowly, and it worked. And these are things that are going to become more common, and these are answers that we don't have at the moment. Can you use the cloud for that? We're seeing the pattern that you're having some governments approving a specified cloud provider for their data. The same goes for the military, and so on and so forth. But are people going to store it in the cloud? Are they going to store it locally? These are the questions of the next decade, and we are only seeing, this is just an introduction to what is coming.
Well,
answer your question?
Not really, but I sorry. I can see where this is, this will be an issue. My advice to you guys is, really think through a more concrete answer to that. So I'll give you for example. When I was working in the cybersecurity business, we're bringing in, tens of thousands of endpoints and, terabytes of data. One of the very simple first questions that comes up from a company is, where are you storing the data?
Yeah.
You know, and so that's, you know, and the simple answer, if it's in the cloud somewhere, is not a good answer. You know, is it on-prem? Is it on a separate server on-prem? How's it? So there's a whole host of questions that I would suggest you kind of figure out a really good answer to, because those are the kind of things I think that will help you separate yourself from other people trying to do the same thing.
So
Noted.
I'll just interject. You talked about the Foxconn facility. Can you give us an order of magnitude or just the number of, say, data feeds that are coming out of that facility that you're managing?
I mentioned that it was over 250,000 IoT endpoints. So an endpoint is not defined by the machine, because the machine might have multiple endpoints. So there's like, there's over 10,000 different kinds of equipments or individual machines that have so many endpoints inside of them, like controllers, switchboards, temperature sensors, and so on and so forth. So using a traditional PLC controller to handle an operation of that scale is necessary, but it doesn't allow you to really scale, because your operation scales with the number of IoT endpoints that are deployed on the ground. So that is also one of the problems we're addressing by having this common operating picture where we only show critical data. We have a queue of items that need to be seen by the user so that it can focus on one task at a time, depending on the priority.
Could you elaborate on possibly where that data stream is being stored or how that's being accessed?
So for the moment, it's always stored on premise, because people don't have the answer yet on where to store it. They don't want to store it on the cloud because every 2 weeks or so there's a data leak somewhere. And I guess that's how far their risk attitude goes. It's like, okay, we're going to store it on premise. And in cases where they have multiple buildings, for example, data centers, they're using their own private clouds to handle that, the synchronization of the data. So in a typical fashion, we don't really have a say in how they're going to store the data, because they are organizations with CTOs, and those are the guys who pull the trigger.
So, I mean, going back to the days of running computer systems, just being a sysadmin and file security, the whole bit, effectively what you're sort of telling me is the old read, write, modify, delete. You really only have view capabilities or read capabilities as far as permission for that data?
No. So as I mentioned before, it's completely federated. So your administrator can essentially create multiple user groups with different rights. So typically the setup that we see on the ground is that non-technical people only have a read-only permission, and people who actually know what they're doing have a write function. But typically, we're not at a stage yet where, in case of a critical event, people are going to send instructions through our platform. So we're still in an early stage considering that. So we have a non-adversarial nature towards those PLC manufacturers. So we work hand in hand, and in case where a device needs to be rebooted or reconfigured, typically the engineer associated with that component is going to take care of that.
Any other questions at this point?
So, I mean, just as some recommendations for you guys to think through. And I realize you're early on in the process, and by the way, I'm a huge Tony Stark fan. But
Yeah.
you know, there's sort of a couple of steps to what you're doing. You know, one is, you know, federalization or democratization of the data, bringing it all in, which is really great, and getting visibility is really great. But frankly, who cares? I mean, visibility is only visibility. And here's how I'm going. Visibility is only as good as remediation processes triggered by the issue at hand. And my suggestion to you guys as you think through this is, it's wonderful to trigger an HVAC escalation, and maybe there's an engineer who's dedicated to HVAC. But when you start crossing silos, there's multiple remediation processes that may not be in place because they're across silos. You may find out that there's remediations even within the silos are inadequate. So there's a whole opportunity, I think, for you guys from a consulting basis and from learning from your customers to ask those really tough questions. You know, who's in charge? Who's remediation? Who crosses silos? You know, who's the second level, third level, fourth level escalation process person? A lot of things come into play that will make your services more valuable than just a visualization and simple triggers. So hope that helps.
Yeah. Noted.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback.
Okay, anyone else? Any questions or maybe comments at this point?
I think this gets to the interesting argument that of simplicity versus complexity and obfuscation. The issue is that as you simplify things, you often create security risk, because a lot of the security today is very much dependent on complexity and obfuscation. So that makes it difficult to breach certain things. And as you consolidate and simplify, it becomes more difficult to become more secure, because once you hack into that single basket, you get access to all the eggs versus having the eggs scattered out and not consolidated. So it's always a difficult value prop, especially when you look at simplification and aggregation, because it often introduces those unique security challenges, and it's a common problem that many of us are having to figure out how to deal with today. I know I struggle with it on some of our products too. Like, the easier you make things to remotely manage, sometimes you have to really address those security issues, because back to the earlier points, data sovereignty as well as data security becomes key questions that you'll get asked repeatedly.
We do.
Okay, well, let's see, we got one more.
Hey, Gary, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah,
Chris,
please
I
do.
did not give you a chance to talk about Architect.
Oh.
You're a CTO for Architect now, right?
That
Can you
is
give us an idea of what you do?
Oh, so what I do is Architect builds managed service portfolio for hardware and software services that we gear towards small and medium businesses, and in particular, we target franchise and franchise management specifically, but not exclusively. It just seems that that's who has the most interest in what we do, because one of the things that we do is consolidate and create service management layer for hardware and software products. So in doing so, I get asked these questions quite a lot about data sovereignty. So it's always top of the mind, especially in light of recent events. So it's very interesting. But a few specific examples of what we were doing. I've got kind of an IoT project going with the local McDonald's in the area for a video communication system with the kitchen staff. And then my primary product is I have a consolidated hardware solution that we deploy on-prem that we essentially have created a business IT rack room in a box that's highly portable, where we enable all traditional IT services, and then provide a service management platform, an anchor point for multiple software integrations. So everything from point of sale systems to security cameras to HVAC systems, interestingly enough, and we deal with a wide number of businesses that are looking particularly to franchise, so that they have one location and they need a cookie cutter method to deploy their IT infrastructure, which is what's every business is essentially becoming these days, across multiple locations. So some of the business I'm dealing with are range from restaurants to axe-throwing entertainment companies to, as I mentioned, I'm working with McDonald's on a project right now, and some others. So it's a wide, and we're also looking at doing some small medical and pharmacy that we're dealing with too. So it's very interesting how you take these small medium offices and how you revolutionize and upgrade their IT infrastructure. And so that's the problems that I deal with every day.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you very much for all your help and support of the Third Friday IoT SIG breakfast, and through your volunteer and your coordination of all this sort of thing. Gary, I'm turning it over to you. This will now become Gary's after meeting roundtable, so take it away, Gary.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to admit that I'm kind of maybe guilty of pushing this whole industrial IoT 5.0, kind of with the mindset, and kind of what I was thinking in the back of my mind was the current platforms that most of us are familiar with, and I mentioned one earlier, the Microsoft Azure-based IoT Central as an example, is pretty much is a 2D dashboard-ish, graphs and charts and so forth type of platform, and I'd like to say that is so 2010. I guess what I'd like to do is throw the question out to the audience: have we made the leap at this point to industrial 5.0 with a 3D gamified interface for typical IoT platforms? So I'd like to just throw that out and see if what kind of comments we're getting. Did we hit the mark? Did we miss the mark? Are we just trying to do some marketing here to get people's attention? I'm just kind of curious on the feedback at this point from what you've seen today. Any comments?
Let's see if that works. Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Solomon, go ahead.
Yeah, Gary.
I'm curious with your feedback.
So yeah, I mean, I think what's fascinating to see is actually the evolution of the technology to becoming a reality, right? I think Louis basically talked about, kept making the reference to Iron Man. We tend to see a lot of things in popular culture sort of projecting where things are. So I think showing that this is actually becoming potentially real, or is becoming real, it's not potentially real, is becoming real, I think is a positive thing. I think the challenge someone put forward earlier, I worked very early on in my career on the SDI initiative, and I do remember we were discussing modeling activities and how important data visualization is to solving some very simple problems that are intuitive once you see them, but it's really hard to create business case to established organizations to do things that way. It's sort of almost like disaster had I been able to do this, I could have avoided this, and that's a hard business case.
I'm just curious, you said SDI, are we talking about Star Wars?
Yeah.
Did you work for LTV?
No, it was working with, I worked for a small company called Computer Technology Associates. We were playing with Martin Marietta.
Okay.
Up in Denver.
The reason I ask is I worked on the Star Wars project also. So
we're both giving
leave
away
me
our
out.
age, Gary. So.
Yes, we are. We absolutely are. All right. Well, I think what we'll do at this point is I'll just kind of do a little bit of a roll call here. And what I'd like to do is just give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves and Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and if you've got any requests of the community here, if you need any help, any projects you'd like to discuss, feel free to do so. Joe, since you're there, why don't you unmute again and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, guys. Hey, I had a little problem with my technology. My internet's a little flaky these days. So I'm on, basically, I do sales and marketing consulting. So I spent a year getting a cybersecurity company up and running from scratch. So I'm dangerous enough to know what some of the concerns around cybersecurity were, but I guess my contribution to this event was really trying to look at it from a customer perspective, not so much from an implementation perspective, but for what messaging would I want to hear as a potential customer, and how does it resonate with me? You know, how would I try to, present this to my decision-making organization and my funders? So I listening very much from a revenue generation perspective. If I was to give you Lewis, something to think about, I probably wouldn't push too much on the gamification and the young millennials and all that kind of stuff. It's a nice feature. It's definitely where culture is going, where technology is going. Probably wouldn't push too hard on it because I think, at least in my opinion, for what it's worth, it sort of decreases the value of what you're doing a little bit. So, just from a business case perspective, I hope that helps.
Do you mind just maybe elaborate on that just a little bit more for us?
Well, so think of someone who is running, again, I don't know whether the thinking of the Foxconn factory. If you were telling me, well, this is a really cool thing, and we built this around visualization and the whole thing. Now, if I'm running a Foxconn factory, I'm the CFO. The last thing I want to hear is that a 7-year-old can run my factory. Okay. I would just, it's a cool idea. It's a great foundational element, but it shouldn't be at least what I took out of this and heard a lot of, a significant part of your presentation.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Thank you for your feedback. Yeshwant, you want to unmute and introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on, and just go from there.
Hey, Gary. Hey, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Hi, my name is Yeshwant Muthuswamy. I'm a technology consultant with expertise in AI, IoT, augmented reality, and virtual reality. I've been at these meetings several times in the past, but haven't had a chance to come off late because I also have a full-time job, but I'm happy to be back here.
Fantastic. All right, Tom Allen, you want to unmute yourself and introduce?
Yeah, I'm Tom Allen with Opango, learning management solutions and content development for anybody that wants to deliver their training content in an online manner. And currently, our largest customer, the Helicopter Association, we're working closely with them to improve the safety needle for helicopter operations. And this came as a result of the Kobe Bryant crash last January. So we're very heavily involved in aviation and aviation safety, and we're also very heavily involved in cybersecurity. So, Tom Allen, I'm here every month. So hopefully next month we can be back in the building. Anyway, Tom Allen, Opango. Thank you.
Thank you. Solomon, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and unmute?
Sure. Thank you. Gary, appreciate it. My name's Solomon Israel. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for SkyMax Network. We are an early stage company that is seeking to deploy 5G telecom networks into sub-Saharan Africa. We are currently in our fundraising phase, so that is for deployment capital. So that is my primary focus at the moment. Could you guys hear me at all?
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh, okay, so yeah, the screen is coming back and telling me there's no audio coming up from my thing here, so I'm not
No,
quite
we
sure.
can hear. Solomon, I'm curious, which countries are you targeting? Because I've had some recent dealings with Africa, and I'm just curious. When you say sub-Saharan, is there which countries specifically are you looking at?
Kenya is the launch market.
Great.
So,
That's the one I was wondering if you were doing.
okay.
It seems there's a lot of technology interest in Kenya right now. So yeah.
It is an extremely stable environment. So we've seen IBM's putting up major research facilities there. So there's quite a bit of movement there.
Agreed.
We just have to get our stuff together here. So.
And you want to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself, and also tell us where you are.
I'm working with NADI, and I actually start working with Google now. So nice to meet you. And I also focus on telecom and the IoT industry too.
And works for Google in Taiwan. Kurt, you want to go ahead and unmute and just kind of introduce yourself again? Anything else?
Yeah, it's Kurt Reilly with Growth Tech Ventures. Yeah, so I work with emerging technology companies, IoT space, medical devices, working with clean energy, electric vehicles, lithium batteries in Europe. So formed a team with Gary and some others around the world. And NADI, we think they're a great client of ours and a lot of potential. So I'm happy to join. I'm in Taiwan. I live in San Diego, but I lived most of my life in Dallas, working for companies like EDS and ACS and CSC and all the alphabets there. Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome. Let me throw out this one last question here before we conclude. Is there any additional questions that you might have, since we still have Lewis on the line, or is there anything that you might need some help with? Because as we all know, the kind of the nasty thing about the IoT industry is that there's a massive amount of failed proof of concepts, proof of values, and mainly we find that that's comes back to the fact that the ecosystem wasn't well put together. There are so many moving parts that are required to actually build an IoT solution, and unfortunately, there really just aren't any companies that are capable of doing completely A to Z for a solution. So that's what this community is all about, is being able to help to build out your ecosystem to find those puzzle pieces that are required. So that said, is there anyone here in your ecosystem that you might need some help? So let me just throw that out, see if there's anyone that is looking for that. All right, any last comments, anyone, before we conclude?
Great meeting. That's all I got.
Thanks, Tom. All right, we really appreciate your participation today. Just want to reemphasize that we are going to start up a secondary meeting on the first Thursday, which happens to be the first Friday morning in Asia. So we plan to extend the IoT breakfast to Asia. And as I said, the timing on that is a Thursday night happy hour for us here in the States. So we look forward to that starting up in 2 weeks. So save the date, March 4th, and we hope all you can attend. Again, thank you for your participation today. We really appreciate that, and have a great day. Stay safe, and for those in Dallas, stay warm. Thank you. Meeting is now
Thanks, Gary. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good
Thanks,
day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, folks, for joining us. Bye-bye.